Welcome to Minerva. Today we're going to be discussing the objects of the Tomar Hoard. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host Duncan.
Hello.
And we have a special guest with us, Hamilton White.
I'm back.
So, we hope to give you guys enough information. You can go away and then start doing your own study. We're going to get straight back into it because this is the second part. If you haven't seen the first part, please do go back and watch it because we're going to just continue off where we've been. And we're going to go straight into the Obsidian Chalice, one of the prize pieces of this collection.
Yeah. Well, there's two Obsidian Chalices, and I mean the smaller one was pretty much the second piece that I got going back in the day, and then the larger one, the story of then tracking it down in Switzerland, that was really what sort of cemented the whole thing. That these stories we've been told are absolutely spot on. There it is. Okay. Like I said before, you walked into someone's place in Zurich. It's on the telly. Ooh.
And I mean, Obsidian's an incredibly hard material to work from.
Phenomenally difficult. Very,
why
very
would they
difficult.
choose something like that?
Well, I think it's to do with the status of the people that were using it. The fact that you've used something that's an incredibly difficult material and a very precious material at the time.
Yeah. And
the fact that Obsidian at the time, what it represented when you go through it, it was referred to as dragon glass, and the stories of where it was supposed to come from, and the symbology that using something made out of obsidian would have meant to you. It's like a sort of combination of three factors that would have just elevated whatever ceremony you're doing. Wow, you're doing it with this unique vessel. And it would have meant something to everybody who's participating in the ceremony, and it just reinforces that you are part of a higher level, higher echelon of society because you're using something that your fellow man hasn't got.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to your place, we've seen some of this stuff, and that was one of the pieces that you showed us, and you got to hold it, Duncan.
I did.
What did you think when you held it?
It was one of those weird things. I suppose there is that concept of midnight. I'll be honest, I was underwhelmed. But I think I can understand that is because we are so programmed when we're looking at things like treasure, stuff we see as important as being like gold or something like something we there is that cinematic way, isn't it? But when you start looking at it and you hear about how hard it is to work, it's also that translucent sort of thing that works with it. We weren't used. I don't know. Romans used glass, and they could actually form glass. So
glass had been around since a little before the Roman times. Yes, you could have made.
So there is still a practical. There are practical options, which again, what I'm saying is, it makes it more of a bizarre choice to have something that could be made from glass, and it isn't. It is taken from this natural source thing.
I found it very. I mean, just to the touch, it's cold, it's heavy, really heavy, and looking at it as an object, I thought it was wonderful. It was just such a, you can imagine that being the prize piece of anything. It would be the one thing that you would either pray to or use in some ceremony, and would be looked after for years and years and years. And there's absolutely. It would be the first thing you would grab in a fire, if that makes sense. Not that it would set on fire, but it would be the first thing you would go in and think, I've got to save that thing. And you say there's a smaller version as well.
There's a smaller version. I mean, it's still a ritual vessel. I mean, it isn't a regular drinking cup you're going to be having with your dinner. Yeah. But visually, the big one, the physical size of it, it's got a presence. It can only be a ritual vessel. It's designed to be held with two hands. You're passing it around. It's the physical amount of liquid it contains. You're not going to drink all of it. It's a passage around the assembled group as part of whatever ceremony you're doing.
And we see that in ceremonies, don't we? The loving cup and things like that. Yeah. That is, a prime example of something that you might see used. So.
And even so, sometimes you have the large cup, because if you have a large congregation, not so much pass it around, but so everyone can see the cup being drunk. If you just the smaller cup. But were you right? Was it actually? Did you say it was decorated beforehand? So it could have had. Again, I'm just looking at the visual prestige.
Looking at the visuals on it, when you look at the actual depth of the carving in it, where you've actually got the crosses picked out, and the roughness of the texture of the stone sort of within the carved out areas, we're pretty sure that it was actually completely inlaid with gold.
Right.
And the breakage on it we're hypothesizing here, but the break that actually happened within the stone, it's as though somebody's got a screwdriver or a lever and levered against it to actually snap the gold out.
Right.
It's not a struck with a spade, it's not a dropped. The actual fracture within the stone itself it's almost as though something's been levered against it.
Right.
And the only reason you would do that is trying to actually, if there was gold inlay in it, it would have been glued in, and I mean it's been forced out, and they broke it in 1960 when it was found.
Now I remember one of the programs that was going about how you could actually date the aspect. Now I really get the sense of where you've gone the understanding now of the tracking it down, where you had the story of Tomar, and you knew that the Swiss had got it, and you went through the process of the different people who had it and got to it. Can you give how did they date it, or how did you get to the dating of the cup itself?
Well, it's very difficult to actually date stone.
Yeah.
You have to really go on the method by which the stone has been worked or manufactured. I mean, if you're working stone today, you're using modern cutting equipment, grinding equipment, and everything is very regular. When you take any of the chalices, but particularly this Obsidian one, everything is slightly out, even if it's only a few millimeters, because everything is handwork. The polishing is all done by hand. The carving is chipped out. I mean, going back to that period, you couldn't really take a metal cutting tool on Obsidian.
Right.
It has to be actually chipped out and then polished, which is using a harder stone, something like a carborundum, to then polish it. But when you look at the inside, you can see how pieces of the obsidian have been chipped out, and it's followed the fissures within the obsidian itself, so it's completely regular on the inside. And there is actually a very thin wall, which is actually where the break is.
Right.
That when it's been worked out on the inside, obviously a piece probably a quarter of an inch, maybe more, has come out, where the natural fissures occur within the stone itself.
Yeah.
And the actual irregular polishing, just everything about it, when you do a proper sort of photo analysis of it and try and balance it out, it's been done by the naked eye. You can see there's very slight odd angles that are a little bit out.
Yeah.
It's just experience, and I mean, coupled with that, where it's come from, other vessels that we know were found with it that are very clearly of the same age.
Right.
It's an experience of handling ancient objects, really.
I suppose going back onto the art side of it, I think it's, again, because we have so much of this modern world of manufacture, which I find difficult to get out of my head. So I suppose that's where the bias things are. So you like get soap dishes and things like that, where it's not there. But I suppose the other thing is that must have been come from quite a rock. Obsidian, isn't it? Yeah. It's like when you see a diamond cut down. You see this massive rocket that's going to be huge, and it ends up being something quite tiny. Yeah. So I imagine it must be the same thing of trying to get through. And so I suppose we're looking at that's how it increases its value as well, because of the size of obsidian. It must have been beforehand. Well,
also it's like when you look at, you can go and buy a piece of obsidian jewellery today. Most of the obsidian that's around is from the American continent.
Right.
What we're looking at going back to the time of the Templars, or even earlier than that, well, America hadn't actually been discovered. So the obsidian you're using is from some very localised sources. Most of it in that period was from Armenia, but which is now part of Turkey. There was a very small deposit somewhere in the Sinai Desert, and there's odd little spots around a couple of the Greek islands. But that was your entire source of obsidian. It was an incredibly rare material. It's not like today where it's coming in by the van load.
Well, this is what we were having a conversation off camera not so long ago, where we say it takes a process for me. So I can imagine for another cynical audience, again, we're expecting this gold-like treasure, not understanding that this commodity we have now, which is quite, I've got that, this, and whatever. Yeah. But when you've got some that is a commodity that is so rare, so hard to work with, then of course it is more valuable than gold. It's just
it's certainly going back 800, 1,000 years. Yes, it would have represented probably 3, maybe 4 years' work for an individual craftsman to actually carve it out of one single lump of obsidian.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have cost an awful lot more money than gold.
Yeah.
See, I'm too much of a modern man. You could put it in the wrong hands and go, be impressed.
That's it.
Blackstone.
I've seen one of these and it's shut down a corner of the side.
Yeah. Do you find that people get some like an energy from it when they feel it, when they touch it? Because it, you know, I'm someone that's always said when we go to sites, when we go to places, I struggle to feel energy where other people do. But actually, when I had that, I did get a strange sense when I picked it up, because just, I don't know if it was renovation or whatever it was. It was just, you know, something sort of comes over you in a sense that you're touching something that's so old. Yeah.
Not necessarily the larger obsidian. I mean, out of the whole group of vessels, it's the smaller obsidian one that everybody who picks it up gets that.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is strange. I mean, I would have thought, using logic, that the biggest and most ceremonial one would have been charged up if there was going to be anything. But it's not. I mean, everybody who picks the little one up, it's just immediately. Why? Can't explain it. It's totally logical, but everybody who touches it gets the same out of it.
I suppose,
Go on.
I'm going to say, for me, it's a case of, you know, I'm not a great one for the energy feeling of things. But when we did come around to yours, when we were doing the swords, that is something else.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's because, of course, and we were discussing this, weren't we? Because when you're holding onto the swords, and they're battered along the blade, it looks like something's used. Yeah. And because it's that, you mentally do feel like, we've seen Errol Flynn, this is something else, this has been used. Mm-hmm. So maybe, you know, this isn't my realm, but maybe because the big cup is so big that you can imagine it's not even used. It's not bad. Where the small one, it takes you down to the level of you being able to use it.
Yeah,
and having a history.
Yeah, I mean, we've recently done a episode on the Holy Grail, and that was fun to talk about. But, you know, there are other chalices within your collection as well, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think in total I've got 12, because 2 more have just come in.
Wow.
In total.
A lot less than your sword collection.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very disappointing.
I'm just saying that.
Very disappointing.
You're down to 60, was it?
Yeah,
60
swords, something like that, yeah.
And what are these chalices made out of?
Well, there's a mixture. I mean, you've got the 2 obsidians, which is what everybody seems to want to focus on.
Yeah.
Which are probably the most important out of the group. You've then got some marble, you've got a couple of alabaster, and the 2 that have just come in, which aren't part of the original Tomar Hoard find, but they are totally genuine, but from a different source. One of them appears to be porphyry, which is like a sort of peculiar purpley coloured stone that... Wow. Interesting, I mean, it's spot on. It was used in Byzantium around the period of the Templars and earlier. There's a very good carving in St Mark's Square in Venice that was brought back by the Venetians from Byzantium at the time of, I think, the Third Crusade, which is 2 porphyry figures. Mm. And from what I've just learnt recently, in the same way that the Venetians brought craftsmen over to Venice to set up the Venetian glass industry, the Italians also brought some carvers over from Byzantium and installed them in Sicily, and they were specialised in carving of porphyry, and quite a lot of the Italian kings, or the Sicilian kings' tombs incorporate porphyry carvings, and it all seems to emanate from this little group that were brought over from Byzantium. And looking at the carving that's on this fresh chalice that's just come in, there's a lot of indications that perhaps this was one that was made in Sicily.
Wow, okay.
I mean, still to be proven, obviously, there's a lot of work to do to try and back it up. But there's subtle differences in the carving and little symbolism that does match up with some churches in Sicily and also in Armenia.
Yeah.
So we kind of narrowed it down to sort of 2 possible countries. But it's got the Templar cross on it, it's got in hoc signo vinces, and quality is just fabulous again. Absolutely beautiful thing.
Fantastic. I think my favourite from everything that you've shown me is the Libation cup.
You like that, don't you?
I really like that cup.
Really? Why? What does that mean?
Yeah, I know. I had the same question. Go on, explain.
I think it's just again, it's heavy. It's just quality, and I think that for me it's the fact that it's got the heads on it. It just feels like something that in my imagination, if I was to say, what were the Templars using?
Oh, okay. You've got your picture. That's what you want it to be.
It's that.
Which is the conversation
The
we
conversation
had
you have
earlier, what you see it to be. Which is no disrespect to it, but when you look, it says a passion for an object and what you actually see it for being. So it is actually one of my favourite, the cups. But from that concept of there's a curiosity, but to me it's again, we were talking about it when we were looking at that process of influence, were we? When we see the Greek, Romans accepted the Greek, and we see that progression. You see a cup which we're looking at age-wise, we're looking at Templar age, but its design or its basis comes from a much earlier
culture.
Just by the sense of how you're looking, that the heads are on there. So
I also like the fact that trying to date it and trying to know that it was buried. There are specific ways of doing that.
Well, that's the best example of all of them, because that's the one we've done the most scientific tests on, and it leaves me baffled. But whatever the extrusions and crystallised growths you get on marble, dependent on the acidity of the soil, and it doesn't. It's beyond my capabilities, but. For whatever reasons, it stacks up. Yep, that's been buried. The crystalline growths that are being pushed from within the marble outwards are correct. The opposite, the way that roots have grown around it and then capillary action has sucked things into the marble. Don't ask me, but yes, basically it's been buried.
But I suppose it goes to the sense of, has that been buried in the ground? And so,
yes, it has.
The scientist goes,
yes.
Yeah, because all these things. Yeah, okay. Was it buried in the ground?
Yes, it was.
Yes, all right, thanks
definitely.
very much.
And I mean, fortunately, that's never been cleaned since the day it was found.
Wow.
Because, I mean, you would just anybody having a go at trying to do something that you'll lose the facial detail if you're not careful. And it's like, for God's sake, leave that alone. That must never, ever be touched.
Yeah. I suppose this goes back again when you say about the find where they were looking for my gold and silver and treasure. Look at that and go, we'll keep it. That would the plant pot, so it's there and whatever.
And do you think the depiction is John the Baptist? I mean, your personal opinion.
I would hazard a guess and say, in my opinion, yes, it is. And I think an awful lot of people have said that, but not everybody. Yeah. I mean, other people have come up with Melchizedek. We've had Jesus. We've had, I don't know. Everybody's got their own ideas on it. And I don't think we're ever going to prove it one way or the other because the knowledge has been lost. I think just on the balance of probability, you would say John the Baptist because there are so many other John the Baptist connections with buildings and legends and feast days. Yeah. But you can't prove it, unfortunately.
And the other thing is a case of, again, we've spoken about this before, and we have it in Masonry, where we'll have a design that exists, and it feels like over the last 100 years, people have felt they've had to justify why we have a particular design.
Very true.
And so we then attribute a value to it. So the question then comes up, says, was it originally meant that way? Or when it was actually officially given a meaning? Like, for instance, if it was, say, this is now John the Baptist, then technically it is because somebody has then decreed it.
Because 100 years ago, somebody decided it was, so therefore it is.
Well, at the beginning, the artist might have gone, a couple of heads would look nice on that. And that could have been the reason. So where do we find what the purpose actually was?
No, it's true. Again, this is just another piece that is outstanding quality.
Oh, it's fabulous. And the standard of carving on it, it's just... Whoever was commissioning this stuff, they've gone to find the best carver of whatever medium they want to use. Yeah. And it's money and time, no object. Everything is the most beautiful quality. Yeah. It really is. It's fabulous.
So moving on and talking about carving, we've got a beautiful piece here in front of us.
We have indeed, yep.
And there's lots of stonework.
There must be 60, 70 pieces of interesting stonework. I mean, that particular piece... I genuinely can't tell you what it's for. I mean, you've got a depiction of what appears to be a monk of some sort kneeling and praying towards what's very clearly a chalice.
But that's rare. That's really rare, isn't it?
It's incredibly rare, other than the fact I think I've got 7 or 8 of them within the collection of stones we've got.
I just blew you away.
It's rare. It's so rare. Yeah, it's rare outside of your collection.
When you're talking in terms of like medieval depictions of art, it's an incredibly rare image because for many years it could have been construed as being heretical because you're praying to something that's out of the ordinary.
Yes, yeah.
So does that explain why a lot of these things were concealed within commanderies, underground places? We don't know. I mean, that particular piece there is one of, I think, 4 or 5 that came from the commandery at Evora, which is an hour south of Lisbon. Fabulous. All of them that have come out are in original paint. All of them have either got chalice or grail symbols or a combination of grail symbols and Templar crosses on them, all out of the same building, very clearly, totally original. They were found in the 1860s, 1870s, but we don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean, we see
that's the problem, you know. How do you interpret it? Is it a monk? Is it a Templar? Why is it in a Templar sanctuary? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. We just don't know.
How do we authenticate that? How do we know that's from... where did you say it was from?
From a commandery or...
Yeah.
There was a group of pieces. Did we talk about on camera the find at Evora, or were we talking off camera?
Off camera.
Okay, right, we're talking now.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were chatting before.
Yeah, sorry, we're babbling away. Sorry, it's me getting old. Or drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back, rewinding in history to sort of 1860s, perhaps close to 1870, there was a very wealthy family in Evora, which was a former Templar city about an hour south of Lisbon, and they decided to be sort of beneficiaries for the town and build a new hospital for the town. And the site that they started digging on to lay the foundations for the hospital, when they got below ground level, they were aware that it was the site of the former Templar commandery, but going down below ground to actually get proper foundations, they opened up a series of vaults which were unknown at the time. And it seems to be some kind of either ceremonial room or cellar or otherwise concealed room. And there were 5 or 6 pieces of stonework, of which that is one of them. Because they'd been perfectly dry storage and concealed for whatever it was, 700-800 years, condition of everything was fabulous. And prior to it being filled up, the family who were the beneficiaries removed all of these Templar carvings, and they pretty much remained with the family for, as far as I know, 100 years. The photo we were talking about earlier, that was going back until we actually found some family photos from roughly around the 1870s, which corroborate, well, yes, they were a moneyed family, they were involved with the government, they'd been involved with slave trading, with banking, they were in the position to be able to be the generous locals. And then all of these pieces mercifully have stayed together since they were found in the 1860s and now sit with me.
Wow.
And it's a fabulous, when you see all the group together, it's fabulous because all the paint is obviously the same date, it's all faded uniformly, and it ties together. Everything has got a little chalice or a cross or somebody praying, so it's obviously part of some either frieze or complete unit.
Yeah.
But you're just never going to know what is it? You know, what were they actually trying to depict by this? Was the chalice used within that room as part of the ceremony, or was the chalice the object that was venerated? Don't know. We genuinely don't know.
Nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
It's staggering, and I mean, you know, it brings me to modern day when you see these. You see pieces of art like Banksy, etc., and they go around and they cut that out so they keep it. And it just feels so similar to that type of thing, you know. To try and because it's such a special piece, and we know that the value's there. Someone has taken the time to actually remove it so that it continues. So
somebody has preserved it. Going back to the 1870s, somebody realised this is important and we need to keep it.
Yeah.
But probably didn't know why or anything. It was just fortunately there were people like that who were doing that sort of thing.
Well, I suppose you're still looking at a time where a religious support was still evident. You know, and so it's a case of, if you've got a room that you're now going to use practical. It would have almost felt sacrilege to just fill it in as it was. So you take it out. We can't do that for grandma's sake. Let's take it. Again, as you say, not for any purpose or not for anything. It's just wrong. We just feel wrong in burying it.
It could have been as simple as that, because go back to that period, it had no monetary value. There was no antiques trade. There was no antiquities trade existed in those days. So you couldn't have sold it.
It just meant something.
It just meant something to whatever the family was who were paying the bill. Like, we've uncovered this. The builders of what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Date out.
Well, as you do, I remember I've been. It's the village in Templar in Scotland. I visited there once. I was just wandering around and I got to speak to some of the locals. And they said, go speak to this guy. And this guy had actually tunnelled under his house and he built this little sanctuary for some dog or something.
Oh, right.
But I can just imagine when he was going down there, these are just the things I found down here. It was nothing, but he kept them because of the actual experience of digging down. They just stuff on the side. But you can imagine years later someone going, wow, that was down here, it was venerated. But was it? That was just novel, I found it.
But what the great thing about it, because it was with a very wealthy family, it's been preserved and the history of it is known. We know exactly the spot where it came from. There's no argument. It came from a Templar property. Yeah. It came from a Templar property in a Templar town.
Kept by that family.
By that family. So your trail back as far as you can take it is absolutely perfect.
Oh, fantastic.
So to be actually saying, well, is it Templar? Absolutely 100% we can prove it. There's no argument about it.
Okay, so one of the other items in the hoard, which is very well known, is the reliquary box.
First thing that came to me that started it all off, and it's the one piece that actually post-dates all the Templar items, so it's actually a bit weird that how you got into it, but just a fabulous piece of medieval art. Yeah. I mean, I'd plonk it somewhere around sort of 1420, 1440, something like that. Okay. In all likelihood, made to the order of Henry the Navigator, who was one of the sons of the King of Portugal. Yeah. He took over as head of the Order of Christ, which was the new incarnation of the Templars, which was a bit of rebranding. He became extremely successful in his own right. He moved himself out of Lisbon and set up his own mansion, offices within the walls of Tomar, and there's a few ruins that are still left of it. Okay. But it's when you start looking at the sort of symbolism within it and start to get your eye into decoding it, you can see a lot of much earlier imagery than the actual date of manufacture. Yeah. There's sort of architectural elements of it that if you just look at it as a box, it's got curly things on the top, so what? But if you look at it in the context of what it came from Tomar, well, these swirly little things are exactly the same as architectural features on the building. Yeah. There's, I could go on and bore everybody senseless about why St. George is an old man, not a young man, and why it's different from other depictions of art, and why has it got gargoyles on it. But basically, it's just a fabulous piece of art, and it's made out of iron, which again is a bit alien. You would have thought a royalty making a donation to the church, you would expect it to be sort of precious metal.
Big and shiny.
Big and shiny, yeah. You're trying to demonstrate your wealth and power by presenting something important. Yeah, of course. Well, the importance is not the fact that it's a valuable metal, it's what it's representing and the continuing of an ancient tradition that quite clearly, if you were a member of the Order of Christ in the 1440s, yes, all your Templar brothers have been dead 100 years, but if you know what you're looking at, you can actually see that you're alluding to, these are my predecessors, that's why George is depicted this way, that's what that symbol means. Absolutely fascinating.
I mean, we picked out here and potted some of the pieces, but is there a route for these? Is there some kind of plan that you have for all of the pieces? Or, I mean, I can imagine so many people watching this and also watching the stuff you've done with the History Channel that would love to be able to see this stuff in the flesh.
Is this going to be a long-winded thing that we carry over to the third one, or a brief potted that we then pick up on at a later date?
We can talk about it.
Okay. Well, It's a very difficult thing. I mean, in an ideal world, what we'd love to do is make a real full-on documentary program. Because, yes, we've done a couple of series, but to me, it's been very lightweight on actually focusing on the history of what the items are, why are they important. And initially, I would really like it if we could do a full-on history program, where even if you only take 2 or 3 of the pieces like that, and really go into it, and cut out all the fancy gibberish that goes on and very poor reenactments of things that are bought off stock footage that doesn't relate to anything at all that we have, and actually get into, well, why is that object important? What is it depicting? And let's look at what symbology is, because it's a fascinating subject. And you could make it interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of poo-poo it, but it's not. If it's the way you portray it, the way you explain things, you can go through and show this symbol moves from the very ancient world through to Romans. Why are Templars using it? What does it actually mean in sort of the Hermetic world or the Masonic world? It's absolutely fascinating. And an awful lot of these pieces have got very weird symbology that the average person, you don't even notice what it is. But it's so important in actually trying to decipher perhaps what the Templar beliefs were. Or where they get their traditions from. That would be a fabulous thing to do.
I know that off camera, we've spoken lots, and one of the things that you've mentioned in the past is that you were keen, and I think you're very close to actually showing this within the confines of Freemasonry.
We got very close. I mean, we were talking to the Freemasons when Series 1 was ending about trying to do something at Freemasons Hall, which the wonderful world of COVID put a kibosh on that. The simplest thing we could probably do at the moment is try and find somewhere where maybe we could just pick a dozen or 15 pieces and almost do a mini exhibition, take half a dozen chalices, take the most important pieces of stonework as a test the water, and we would absolutely love to do it. You've got the problems of where do you do it, security, insurance. I mean, I did look at insuring things, and it's like you'd be buying a new house every month. It's ruinous. You know, we almost need a corporate sponsor or something to come on board, because bear in mind, everything is funded by me or somewhere through what we're doing. You know, just the amount of money. Everybody thinks it's simple. Oh, go and put them in a display cabinet somewhere. You know, you're probably looking at 6 or 7 figures that needs to be produced to actually put on a proper display. There's a lot more. You know, you can't just go and plonk it in a cabinet in somebody's high street window.
And the worst thing is with that, it's a case of, okay, so you offset it by selling tickets. But then people start saying, "Oh, now you're trying to profit
you got it.
For it." Well, you got it. You're actually just trying to. This is how much it costs to actually
to put it on. People don't seem to grasp that. They think that it's some magical thing that you click your fingers and we'll have an exhibition. That sounds a doddle. It really doesn't work like that at all. You know, and I mean, you got the lawyers involved. Where's it being stored? Who's got access to it? Where is It's an almost impossible task to put on. I mean, in an ideal world, probably Freemasons Hall as part of a Masonic exhibition or part of the Masonic Museum would be great. I mean, if they want to talk to us, come and talk to us.
Fantastic. Well, we've got some connections there, so we can certainly put the right people in touch with the right people.
I mean, I think there's going to be a band of people who will be poo-pooing it, that, oh, you shouldn't be doing it with the Masons and it's not Masonic. Well, I tell you what, why don't you come and give us some suggestions or give us some help in doing it? Every time you do something, there's always somebody wagging their fingers. They'd have done it better. They know more than you do.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it then? You know, give us a break, will you?
I mean, there'd be enough Masons who are interested in the field, whether they connect it to Freemasonry or not. It's irrelevant.
Look at it as a historic object. It doesn't matter whether it's connected or not. It's an intellectual stimulant. If you've got a brain, come and look at it. Make your own opinions on it.
Just to finish off this episode, because I am aware that time is racing on, but what I really want to do is just to ask you if there's any other pieces that we haven't discussed that you find particularly peculiar or interesting.
There's a couple of interesting pieces of just very simple carved stone that appeal to me because I don't understand them. I think there's 3 of them. If you imagine the regular Templar cross, like on the little altar thing we had, There are 2 of those that are half Templar cross and half Chalice. Really odd. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then there's a 3rd one, which is half Order of Christ cross and half Chalice. So obviously Templars have gone, but again it's demonstrating that the Order of Christ are still continuing some symbology or tradition from their forefathers. And it just really interests me because I've no idea what it represents. I mean, again, it's a very clear connection between Templars and Chalices, because you can't mistake the carving for anything else. It's very clearly a chalice, and it's very clearly incorporated as 2 arms of a Templar cross. Yeah. And there's one other that I found that is still in situ in Palmella, which is one of the Templar places south of Lisbon. Absolutely exactly the same image, and nobody seems to know there. I haven't got a clue, can't tell you anything.
Well, I've saved the boys' toys till the last. Tell us a little bit about the sword. And is there just one sword in the collection, or is there a number?
No, I mean, within the things of the Templars, no, there is just this one single sword. Very simple sword to look at. It's designed for use. It's not a toy, it's not ornamental, it's not overly decorated like a royal sword would be with inlays and coats of arms. It's purposeful. It was designed for killing people.
I mean, you say it's not a toy. We enjoyed...
you had a good play with it.
We enjoyed waving it around.
Well, everybody does. It doesn't matter. Everybody has to wave a sword around if you give it to them. So, we'll excuse you on that one.
Thank you.
But no, I mean, it's got 3 Templar crosses on it. It's condition-wise, it's exactly what you'd expect for something that's been excavated. The story we have being part of the Templar Hoard seems to stack up absolutely perfectly. And there is one sword out of the whole history of Templars. There is only one weapon recorded as ever being preserved, and that's of the last Grand Master who fell at Acre in 1291.
Wow.
He was killed by a crossbow bolt or an arrow whilst fighting on the walls of Acre. He was actually carried off the walls and died a few hours later within the hospital at Acre. But it is recorded in the document written, I think, only about a month after the siege, that his sword and his shield was carried away, which is a complete anomaly, because the whole thing about Templars, you're anonymous. Nobody kept weapons or swords. They were a communal thing and they went. But for whatever reason, was it because he was particularly valiant or particularly... We don't know. But there is a single recorded instance of a sword and shield being taken away and preserved. We know whatever was at Acre in 1291 when the city fell was removed on the very last boat that left Acre, and it was held back to the very last minute, and it's recorded in documentation, and it says the treasures of the Templars were removed on the last boat. It doesn't say what they were. It doesn't say, it says the treasures of the Templars.
Yeah.
It's a candidate for being that sword. We can't prove it, and I genuinely wouldn't put my hands up and claim it to be that sword, because I can't. Yeah. However, if you look at every other sword of the medieval period, well, if there is going to be a sword that could be that sword, well, it's this one. But again, I can't prove it. It's balance of probabilities. It may very well be, but I can't prove it. No. I can't. Nobody ever will be able to. So you can believe it or you can not believe it. But when you look at it as an item, the age of it's right. It's a fighting soldier's, very well balanced. It's a foot soldier's sword more than it is a horseman's sword. It's got 3 Templar crosses on it. I don't know what more you'd want.
Well, it's...
besides a label on it.
Well, a label saying
nice.
Fine.
If you ask me what I want for it.
It doesn't work,
It's a fantastic collection. It really is.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's been a delight for you to certainly come here and talk to us about it and to hear about it. And I'm sure for people watching this, they've enjoyed that as well. We've got one further episode to come, and that's going to be a bit more fun. We're going to talk about the fun you've had with the History Channel. We're going to talk about your friend Carl and everything else. So please do like and subscribe, and you'll see that again very soon.